what's up, y'all? It's me here, Michael Franti, and welcome to this week's episode of the Stay Human podcast. I am super excited, first of all, to have our guests on who are just absolutely amazing people. You're going to just be thrilled to hear this conversation that I know is going to be awesome. And I'm even more excited because my wife, Sarah, is joining me for the first time on the Stay Human podcast. We've been talking about this for a long time. And been like, well, what's the conversation?
Well, it's been a long time coming. Michael's begging me all the time, Sarah, I'm recording. Come join. And I'm always making excuses. And then when he told me.
It's not like you're just making excuses. She's like, I got this little thing I got to do.
Put our kid to bed.
It's called a 2-year and 9-month-old. So it's not like you're just not doing nothing.
Yeah, so I'm doing nothing. I'm doing some important things. But when Michael shared who was going to be on the Stay Human podcast tonight, I set my alarm. I made sure I did not fall asleep putting Kosh to bed. And I am here, stoked, ready to
Let's do it.
Yak, right?
Yeah. So as always, we want to say thank you to the great Gibson Guitars for sponsoring the show. And we love them. And we love JC Curley, who runs that joint. He's awesome. And they're doing such good stuff in the community in Nashville now. And, 100 years of making guitars is not a bad run.
Yeah.
So our first person I want to introduce you to is an internationally celebrated yoga teacher, author, storyteller, mythology buff, and mama to her 2 senior dogs. She's the author of Aim True and the Women's Health Big Book of Yoga. And she founded the Inky Phoenix, an online book club for fellow lovers of story. And Kathryn just launched her newest project, Haus of Phoenix, on Union Fit, where she offers yoga, recipes, stories, and spontaneous transformation. And she co-hosts the Webby Award-nominated podcast, Free Cookies, with her wife, who is
Kate Fagan. Kate is an Emmy Award-winning journalist with the #1 New York Times best-selling author of What Made Maddy Run, which was a semi-finalist for the ESPN Award for Literary Sportswriting. That's incredible. Her first book was the coming-of-age memoir, The Reappearing Act, and her third book, All the Colors Came Out, was recently released in May 2021 and she's from Little Brown.
Yeah. So please welcome to the show, Kathryn Budig and Kate Fagan. How are you guys?
We are ready to yak, y'all, and we are ready for our couples therapy session. It is on.
Yes.
Yeah, unlike you
guys?
two. Yeah, we're in our house and we're in separate rooms of our house, which is a very rare occurrence since the pandemic happened. So we're having some separation anxiety right now.
Well, that's why I asked. Are you guys on like some kind of like extreme quarantine where you have to be within your house
Right.
but you have to be in different rooms?
We each get one dog so that we don't get lonely.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, we legit have merged over the last year where we complete each other's sentences. We watch, our Netflix every night, and we both have the weird same thought about what's happening on the TV at the same time. Like it's creepy. We are one person now. It's happening.
Totally melded. Sarah and I are that way.
Yeah.
People think we look alike at times. They're like, are you guys brother and sister?
Well, we actually got that. We get that a lot when we were going through TSA. Actually, we get that a lot. Are you guys related? And I'm like, no, we're married. But I guess, when you start, although you guys still like physically look different enough. I feel like we probably look more alike.
Maybe.
Yeah, we don't.
Maybe I'll dread my hair.
Yeah, we don't get the related question.
Podcast is all about this belief that I have that there's no one that you wouldn't love if you knew their story. So I just want to dive in on that because you guys both have really interesting stories. So Kate, let's start with you. Where did you grow up? What was your family like? And, what was your household like when you were raised?
Yeah. I grew up in a town outside of Albany, New York, in upstate New York. So like 2.5 hours from Manhattan. And I guess the best way to describe our family, it was a foursome. It was my mom, my dad, and my sister Ryan, and our cat Buddy. So yeah, it was a fivesome. But our household was definitely a basketball household because my dad had played pro ball overseas, and he was a huge sports fan. So we're very much a sports household. And my mom had grown up a Boston Red Sox fan and all New England sports. So she loved it too. And my sister, I started playing basketball and my dad taught me the game. And my sister was lacking in the hand-eye coordination department. So she became a runner. And sports really defined our childhood. We both went and played in college. I played at Colorado and Boulder. She ran at Dartmouth. We had one of those childhoods where you don't realize your parents aren't perfect until you get a little bit older and you start to see them more clearly. Mm-hmm. But for when we were in elementary school, middle school, and even through high school, I just thought my parents were the best. And I still think they're the best. My dad passed away about 1.5 years ago of ALS, which was a huge turning point in my life. But it was I'm incredibly lucky because I had two parents, not only who loved each other, but they loved us, but they also really liked us. And that was cool. So it was, I could take you farther through my journey up until when I met Kathryn, but I feel like that's a good foundational piece right there.
That's a good foundational. Kathryn, why don't you give us the same sort of deep brief on it? And then I'll ask you some other questions, both of you guys.
Yeah, my upbringing was very different from Kate's. I grew up in Kansas, Lawrence, Kansas. So University of Kansas Jayhawks. Like I was told that the Jayhawk delivered me and not the stork. So big basketball fan. We do have that connection going on. But my father was the chancellor at the university. So we lived on grounds and it was the 80s. So I spent all of my time outside by myself, where like mom would kick me out and be like, come back later and survive. And I would. And it was such a magical upbringing because I would just probably go eat a lot of plants that in retrospect could have poisoned me, but it seemed like a good idea. There was milk thistle and little honeysuckles and stuff like that. So it was very conducive to, I think why I love storytelling so much and why I love magic and why I love mythology was I didn't have those electronics and I was outside just nurturing my imagination in the great outdoors of Lawrence, Kansas.
Yeah. I've been to the great outhouse of Lawrence, Kansas.
Oh.
There, I don't know if it's still there, but there was a punk rock venue called the Outhouse just outside of Lawrence, Kansas.
Oh, I love it.
A place of great lore on the punk rock trail. And I also had one other great experience in Lawrence, Kansas, which is I got to do a record with William S. Burroughs, who lived in Lawrence. And we got to go out to his house and record him reading his books and writings and poetry and literature. And so that was an awesome Lawrence, Kansas memory. Kate, Sarah and I, we play basketball. And it's been one of the things of the pandemic. You want to just jump in on it?
Yeah. Well, I'm 5'10", and so everybody assumed that I should be good at basketball. Everyone assumed that I played basketball, but I grew up in a family that was very academic. And sports, we didn't really have the money to be put in organized sports, and so the priorities were like school. My background's Persian, and so it was school and then piano lessons, and those are my things. And so I wasn't very good at sports at all. I did not have the hand-eye coordination, but everyone assumed. And when I would play, I was very defensive. I was always the defense. Everyone's like, Sarah, stop getting your elbows out, pull your elbows in. But when I turned 35, Mike would want to go out and shoot, and I was like, I want you to teach me how to play. And so it actually started pre-pandemic. Yeah. We'd go out on tour and Michael would take me out and he'd start teaching me how to shoot. And then when the pandemic happened, it just became like our thing, and it became like our therapy.
Every day
we've been going out,
play basketball.
And there's a court near here that was locked down, but we knew the owners of the court, and so we'd sneak in during the lockdown, we'd play. And Michael was like, the other day, he's like, you know what, Sarah? He's like, after Michael, I've probably shot the most baskets on that court in
the history of that
but it's been so cool because it made me realize that you could learn anything at any age. It was so cool.
You can learn. And also, for me as a kid, basketball was it was a way to be seen, but it was also a way for me to escape and to get away from a bunch of family challenges that were happening for me. and when I was on the court, spending those hours on the court by myself shooting, or now I want to learn how to do something with my left hand that I could only do with my right hand before, and spending those hours of discipline out there. But it was also really an emotional place for me to just like think or to not think or be away. What was it like for you as a kid growing up and having sports become a part of who you are at that young age, and being able to just have those hours to learn and to think?
Yeah, it really laid the foundation for like the structure of how I approach things in life, because both of you know this, but Michael especially, because you started playing when you were a kid. I really now looking back on it realize how much I would emulate things I saw, because first it would be my dad, but not always. I remember vividly watching this movie, and now it's such an older movie now, but at the time it was a movie about Pistol Pete Maravich, and it was called Pistol Pete, and he was a player in the 70s and an extremely flashy, you would describe him as a flashy player. And he would do things with the ball.
The flashiest player.
Yeah, one of the flashiest players probably of all time. I think most basketball people would agree that he's on that list. So he's doing no-look passes. He's trying to put the ball behind his back and between his legs just to like do something really, really clever with the ball. I remember watching that movie and going directly out into my driveway when I'm 9 and trying to figure out how to, put the ball behind your back, which is not an easy thing when the size of your hands are like a 9-year-old. But seeing those things and then going out and trying to create those movements in my own body was something that it's still something that I wish I still had the feel of. And I've like you were saying, like I've tried to learn things now that I'm, mid to late 30s, but I've been able to do it, but there's something about that feeling of growing up and mastering something that was so beautiful. And I remember thinking it was really cool at the time. But that structure of learning something really laid a foundation for approaching things and giving me self-confidence and self-awareness, because if you're 9 and you figure out how to put the ball behind your back, what can you not do? I mean, so, and one other thing about that point though, it also made me realize that like, I could only watch men doing this thing. And so I always was pretending to be a male player. I only had male posters on my wall. And so as I got older in life, I remembered that I would think back on that and be like, why? Well, now I hope girls can have posters of like my Amor, Diana Taurasi, and all these other players. But I definitely was only emulating men playing the game because that was all I was seeing.
I would like to chime in here as the 5'2" person in this conversation and point out and also to be Team Sarah, like I'm super scrappy too. Well, when I played basketball from 5th grade to 8th grade. But I would just like to point out the advantage of being 5'2" when you play basketball is that you're right on the level where the hand bounces, the ball goes from your hand to the ground. So it's really easy to just whap it like a little cat, like out of the way.
I think we have a budding 2-on-2 challenge happening here on Soul Shine at Sea. I feel that maybe me and Kathryn against you and Sarah, Michael.
You know what? I get so well, see, that's the thing is like I grew up so insecure around sports because I didn't have that trust in my body that you're talking about, Kate. Like I have just gotten a taste of that now at 35. And I hear what you're saying is that when you're young, it just feels more natural and you have less doubt. Like you just keep imagining it and envisioning it. And it's funny because we try that emulating thing here, like on the court. And like sometimes I'll be like, Michael will be like, arch it up. And I'll be like, what does Steph Curry look like? Or like what does someone look like when they're shooting? And I'm like just trying to feel it. But now it's like I'll be able to get that taste of like, okay, if I can do this, what else can I do? But I'm super insecure playing games. I'm going to tell you guys a really quick funny story.
Okay.
So we're out on tour. This is like when we just started playing. And whenever we'd land in a city, we'd find the nearest YMCA or YWCA and we'd go shoot. So we go to this YMCA. I don't know where we are, like Philadelphia or something. And there's like a 9-year-old and like a 6-year-old or like a 7-year-old like shooting baskets. And they're just like, everyone just gets like super enthralled by Michael. Like all the kids just like stand there and just watch him shoot and they just like love it. So now we've been shooting for about 30 minutes and this one kid like really like sly comes, he goes, hey, you want to play 2-on-2? And I was like, no. Don't say yes, please don't say yes. And Michael's like, what? And he's like, you guys want to play 2-on-2? Michael's like, yeah, let's play. And I'm like, I give him like the death stare. Like, I'm like, why the F did you just say yes? Now I have to be scrappy with this like 7-year-old.
It's a no-win.
It was the worst. So, moral of the story is I'm going to practice actually playing and not just shooting so we can have a 2-on-2 game.
Yeah. And if you don't want to play 2-on-2, we can play some horse. We can do whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. Kathryn, I want to ask you about yoga and how that came to be part of your life. You know, when I got into yoga, I feel like I was just broken in every way. I was touring way too much and my mind was just incredibly taxed. I was physically just feeling beat up from being on the road. I wasn't sleeping enough. I was eating horribly. But the biggest thing for me was just all this, you know, what we call in yoga, like monkey mind. It's like my mind just never stops, never shuts up. And it's constantly in self-judgment and self-criticism. And then I went into a yoga class and it was September 12th, 2001, the day after September 11th. And I was incredibly stressed out. And I walked out of there and I felt like different. I was like, I feel different. And I want more of this, whatever this is. Talk to me about how you came to yoga.
God, I so relate to that sentiment. I found yoga when I was in college. I was at the University of Virginia, and I was doing loads of musical theater. So I was a English literature major and a drama major. So one of my dance friends was like, hey, there's this thing called yoga that I found and you got to go check it out. So I was like, all right, cool, let's do it. So we went off grounds and she took me downtown to a local studio. And the very first class I took, and I had dabbled in more like YMCA classes, right? You know, just like very casual yoga here and there. But this was my first proper studio senior teacher experience. And the first one I didn't quite relate to, but then we went back to an Ashtanga class taught by Jennifer Elliott, and she was a goddess. I mean, long gray braids, just moved like a panther. Like she was unbelievable. So I was so enamored with her. And after the first class with her, I had that same feeling of, I feel good, different. Couldn't put my finger on it. And yeah. So I started going back every Friday, and I was on a college student's budget. So going to a yoga class that didn't have anything to do with the university was expensive, but I like made it work. Eventually figured out to pull off 2 classes a week. And then Sarah, going back to what you were saying earlier, I think what hooked me was, it was like finding this inner superhero inside of me, that my physical body was capable of doing these movements that I'd never even fantasized about doing because I didn't know they existed. And recognizing with that discipline and showing up that you change, you grow, you become stronger. And that was definitely what hooked me in the beginning. And then as I continued to learn, and then I went to Mati Ezrati and Chuck Miller at Yoga Works in Santa Monica, where I trained, they were the ones that started to open the door to the spirituality and the different limbs of the yoga practice. But I think in the beginning, it was the simplicity of, I feel better when I do this, and I feel like a badass. You know, it really empowered me to think, if I can bend backwards and reach for my heels, you know, the sky's the limit. If I can do that.
At what point did you think like, hey, maybe I'm going to graduate from just like kind of going to class every now and then to, wow, maybe I could kind of do that. I could teach this. Like, tell me about that transition.
This part of the story is always fun because musical theater. right? So I still had stars in my eyes, and I was either going to move to New York and pursue Broadway, or I was going to move to Los Angeles and go to Hollywood. And I chose Los Angeles because I had already lived on the East Coast for a long time and I wanted to do something different. And Jennifer told me, you should go train, and you need to go to Yoga Works, and you need to train with Matthias Radi, which meant nothing to me at the time. So I did. And once I got there, there was that juxtaposition of yoga teaching me that like, you're perfect as you are, and like, just be in your body and appreciate it. And then going to meet with managers and having them, and I was 21, size 2, and having managers be like, well, honey, I hate to say this to you, but at the weight that you're at right now, you could be the funny best friend. I know it sucks. It's just how it is. But, like that stuff sticks with you forever. And so I quickly realized my experience in Hollywood, this isn't about the craft. This isn't about the theater and the drama that I grew up loving so much. This is a community that I didn't want to become part of, while Mati was lifting me up on the mat at the same time. And so when I graduated from my teacher training, I thought I was just going to teach yoga so I could make money before I like made it big. And I quickly realized, wow, this is fulfilling me. I'm going to bed every night, excited to wake up and do this again, excited to be with my students, excited to explore my own practice. And it turned into a wildly accidental career path.
Wow. As I've traveled around the country as a musician, I started going to yoga classes in every different city that I go to. And you meet this, what we in yoga call a kula. It's like a community of people in each city. And it would be so remarkable to me how people would just drop into each other's intimate space. I mean, in terms of like sharing their story, talking about trauma in their lives, talking about their experience, like just people that you never met before feel that sense of like ease through having explored that in yoga. And I kind of want to like talk to both of you about that, because when I grew up in sports, it was the opposite of that. Like that wasn't, there was no space for that, and I found it in music and I found it in yoga. But talk to me a little bit about that, about how your inward journey in yoga and Kate, just how you've, as a writer and going through the things in your life have, explored that part of, being an athlete.
It is interesting with Kate, because when we first met, what was the yoga you used to do, babe? The Xbox, or what was it?
Okay, let's come on. It was the P90x.
See, there's an X in it. Yeah.
And there was one yoga class. And in fairness to the P90x yoga, it was 90 minutes. It hit all of the, traditional poses. You did all the warriors. You basically did every fundamental, like foundational pose. So it was actually a pretty good, like 90-minute class.
P90x is hardcore, man.
P90x, that's a butt kicker.
P90x is hardcore. I mean, I start that in the first 20 minutes. I'm like, I'm out. I'm like not even hitting 90 of the first.
I didn't do any of the DVDs that were like, you just basically do squat jumps for like 45 minutes straight. I mostly leaned on the yoga class that I did, but that was the only yoga I'd ever done, was that P90X.
I graduated from P90 seconds. I don't know if you've ever done P90 seconds, but that was my program. Do 90 seconds of burpees and then you're done. Yeah.
That is my kind of workout. But I mean, Kate, I think you agree, the kind of yoga that you had done prior to meeting me definitely didn't have any kind of spiritual component or component that encouraged you to look inward. And I think this is the part of yoga. And for anyone who's listening, if you haven't experienced yoga, and I used to be this person when I was younger, I think it's very easy to look at it kind of with a raised eyebrow and be like, that crunchy shit. No, like I think people might have a slight weathered approach to if they think this is going to work or not. But Michael, like you were saying, it is wild because you go into a room of virtual strangers and you start to breathe together and you start to move together. And and I'm not saying that other modalities of movement can't be spiritual, right? I mean, burpees can be spiritual. Anything can be spiritual if you want it to be. But because of the lineage and the setup of how yoga works, it does, it clears out the monkey mind. And it's called Chitta Vritta Nirodha. And you go in and you cleanse your mind of all these stories. And this is why it's so great for athletes too, because if you want to flick it like curry, right? And you want to be in the zone, as they say in the sports world, you know.
I was just digging the flick it like curry thing. I never heard that.
I was I know. I was like, I do make it that easy, don't I, baby?
Right? But it is a meditative practice. You have to be able, right before you step onto the court, you have to drop everything. You have to drop your ego. You have to drop your distractions and just be in the moment. And so in that sense, like, yes, as a human, yoga is amazing because it allows you to drop your preconceived notions of what's going on and the things that the little stories that you tell yourself every day that prevent you from, you know, stepping into who you are and stepping into what you want to achieve, and fear-based. And I think it applies to athletes as well, where if you can wipe that away, I mean, back when I played basketball in middle school, the fear that I would get before stepping on the court in front of, you know, the whopping 30 people who would watch our games, but still, you know, it was so performative. And it was very easy to make that about the people watching me instead of my game or my experience. And I do think I've seen yoga help Kate in that way, that I think it allows her to slip into a clearer headspace, not only for sport activities, but I would say that it's affected you overall.
Yeah, I was going to add that I think I would have gone farther in basketball if I had been able to be less meta about everything I did in basketball. And because every time I played, I was aware of every layer of everything. Like I wasn't just on the court playing the game. I was always like, oh, okay, what does everyone in the arena think? And if, you know, sometimes the games would be on like Fox Mountain or ESPN2. And then I'd be aware that there was the people in the arena. Then there was the people watching on TV. Then there was the effect that game might have on the future. And I could never get out of, I'm a very like data counting, like deconstructing kind of person. And I could never get out of that on the basketball court, or I could only in pockets before it, like, all of the layers of self-awareness would come crushing down on me. And when I was at ESPN, I would talk to so many athletes, and I was always fascinated by the ones who were able to live completely on the field or the court. Like I remember talking to Abby Wambach, formerly of the U.S. Women's National Team, about that header she had against Brazil almost 10 years ago now. And I was like, well, so in that moment before, you must have been thinking, if we lose to Brazil, we're out of the World Cup, earliest exit ever, this is on ESPN, this is the most pressure moment. She was like, no, I was running down the field wondering where the ball was. And I was like, okay, so this is there's a complete difference between how you're able, and that doesn't mean that people who are self-aware, athletes who are self-aware, can't execute in big moments. I think you have to kind of override. I think it's more debilitating than it is empowering when your mind works that way. So transitioning to yoga has helped me try to cut back on some of that, even though I still find it incredibly challenging. Even in yoga, my mind is like pinging. I mean, like a lot of people, but I'm like deconstructing everything, which helps me as a writer. Doesn't help me on the basketball court, but that's not that important right now. But it's not great for my mind, and yoga has yoga has calmed some of that.
You know, there's a term that it's not new, but it's new to me, but like flow state. And that's what it is really like when I'm resonating, what I'm hearing is like yoga almost for me is like, it's almost like it's almost a sure thing of getting into a flow state because you have the whole room breathing. And I just like love when I sit on my mat and the teacher is like, what is your intention for that class? And then moving my breath to that intention really helps me get into that state where then I can just focus on like where I'm at right now and we're not where I have to be once the class is over or what I'm doing. And so that's really cool. I really resonate with everything that's being shared.
And I want to ask y'all questions. I mean, so does that with your music, with being in front of thousands of people, I mean, are you like Abby Wambach where you're like, what's the, where's the ball? Like just like so in it that, or are you like, is the crowd feeling it? Like, am I delivering what the people came for? Like what goes on for you?
It's a combination of both. I feel like I've always had incredible stage fright, and like what you were saying, Kate. It's like whatever the situation is, it could be like 3 people just in my living room, or it could be 30,000 people at a festival. There's always a story that's going on in my head about, am I showing up? Am I good enough? Are they going to like me? Am I going to hit the high note? Am I going to forget the words? Can I fumble with the guitar, whatever? And all that chatter goes through my head. But it's like when you get into the game, it's like all those things go aside and you just get into a groove with it. But the difference for me is that when I was playing sports, there's this assigned task, and it's your job to guard this person. There's plays that need to be run. You got to be thinking, and it does become second nature. But it's not really me expressing how I feel, which is very different. Putting that out in front of an audience. So like when I go on stage, I'll sing songs about the most sacred or painful moments of my life, or the most joyous moments about my life. And in between songs, I'll share my thoughts about what's happening in the world or what's happening in my relationship. And so I'm out there really telling my truth to complete strangers who are drunk, and so it can be really scary. But yoga has really helped me to process things in advance in ways that I never had before, so that by the time that I do share it, it's like I'm doing it mindfully. Like, here's where I know my comfort zone is, and I might go a little bit beyond my comfort zone, but I also know when to pull back. And maybe there's things that are better not to be said in front of 30,000 people, and better just shared with my wife or with a close friend on the bus at the end of the night of the show. The great thing about music that I love is that it's the expression of feelings. So, or the sound of feelings. And so when you do that, when you share the sound of your feelings, and it connects with other people, and you get this feedback that's so powerful, and it's different than like, awesome shot, oh yeah, we won the game. It's different than that kind of relation. It's like a real like heart connection, and that's where my connection to yoga is, with and mindfulness and music, where those things all meet, is that that expression of emotion.
I want to ask you something not so serious.
Okay, go ahead.
Just as Michael's talking and saying like, maybe there's certain things that I shouldn't say on stage and I should just keep it between my wife. And I'm thinking like, has there been a moment where you're like sharing on stage and you're like, oh fuck, I am oversharing right now to 10,000 people?
Pretty much, yeah. That's pretty much every night.
Of like, oh my
pretty
god,
much every night. Well, no,
but it's like a funny story. Like, did something ever happen, or it's just like this mindfulness that you're speaking to of like sharing mindfully?
Well, there's times when I say stuff where I look out into the audience, and there'll be some people who are clapping and going, yeah, and then the other half of that, it's just like rolling their eyes, and the other group in the corner is rolling their joint, and
so it's like knowing your audience.
So it's always, yeah, it's knowing your audience. But I think the main thing is just being authentic and not, like you said earlier, Kathryn, like performative. It's like I am doing a performance, but when people connect to it is when I'm really being authentic.
Exactly.
And so
yeah,
I do say stuff that I sometimes later regret. Mostly it's political stuff,
Mm-hmm.
like I'll just throw out, oh, fuck Trump, like it doesn't always go over so well, but I have done that.
Dixie Chicks moment.
Yeah. But I think at the end of the day, it's music has this ability, like food or free cookies, for example, to
Bring people together.
break down the barriers and go beyond that.
Yeah. Well, I was trying to think right now because I was an ER nurse for a long time, and I'm thinking like, were we meant like, would I go into like that kind of like flow state or meditative state as an ER nurse? And like, we actually do too, right? Because when you're in a stressful moment, you have to keep, it's very systematic, but there has to be a way where you can block everything out and get the task done. But at the same time, I'm always having to think like, what's the next thing? So I was actually just sitting here wondering, monkey braining while you were talking, half listening. I'm like, what was my energy like? Like maybe that's why ER nurses, like, we're just so A-type because we're constantly like having to hit the next thing. I don't know. Anyways.
Okay, let's ask him the question that we've been dying to ask him.
Okay, you ask.
How'd you guys meet?
No.
Tell us the juicy stuff. Get into it.
Well, do you want to start or you want me to go?
No, you start.
Okay.
You know the story's good when they're like, no, you start.
Yeah.
No, you start.
Let's hear your version.
It was a little complicated. We met at a ESPN summit. This is back when I was sponsored by Under Armour, and they sent me there to teach, and Kate was there to say all the smart words on stage. And she came and took my class, and I noticed her because she's drop dead gorgeous, and she was all like, cool basketball player, cool. And I was all like, I'm a yoga teacher and I'm flexible. I'm kidding. But we just really hit it off, and we swapped numbers, and we started texting each other every day. And it was a little complicated because I was married at the time, and to a man. And Kate thought that this was, I didn't even know what it was. I just knew that she was this absolutely magnetic human that I had to speak to every single day. And so it was a little complicated for Kate because she's like, oh, a straight girl thinks it's fun to flirt with me. Awesome. And I didn't even know what was happening. I just knew that with due respect to the marriage that I was in, that it was not right. And I think that was a voice that I buried for a long time. And meeting Kate, just like, short of just being a little too mushy here, she reawoken that, like, oh my God, this is love. Like, this is what people write about. This is what people sing about. And like, shit, what am I going to do? Because this is what people talk about that, like, I feel is so rare. And take over, because I'm getting emotional because I love you.
I love that so much.
My contribution is that, and this isn't necessarily about how we met, but about how our relationship and how it made me feel. I'm a cliche because I'm going to put it in sports terms for everybody. And it's the Olympics, so this makes sense. Like a gymnastics routine where the starting value, if you put together a routine that's really challenging and difficult, like a Simone Biles routine, it's worth 10 points. And so if you execute everything perfectly, you get a 10. There's a lot of routines at different levels, sometimes even at the Olympics, for the starting value of the routine. Sometimes it can be 7.25, sometimes it can be 9. And that means that, like, even if everything goes as well as the gymnast wants it to go, best score they can get is an 8.5. And I feel like a lot of people get into marriages that have a low starting value. And, and it. You know what's happening when you're in one of those relationships. You're like, okay, if everything goes perfectly in this relationship, it's a C. It's a 7.25. You know this. People know. And I think they know. And I've been in those relationships.
Deep down. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
You know. And when I met Kathryn, part of what was so scary beyond wondering, okay, how does she identify? Is this just a fun distraction because she's bored, or is this legitimately something that she feels and would actually be committed to long term? There was the fear of that, but the bigger fear was that it was the first relationship that I'd ever thought to myself, like, this has a starting value of 10. And that's terrifying. Like, it's terrifying if you're Simone Biles and you're doing the first ever triple backflip on the floor. Like, it's terrifying. Because like, if you mess up on the triple backflip, like, you have a broken leg. On the 7.25 routine, like, there's not a lot of risk. So that's my sports metaphor for the 10.0 relationship that was Kathryn.
I have learned so much because I did not know that about gymnastics either.
All right.
Okay. And our relationship. So it's like
I love
a little
it.
bit of sports
I
knowledge.
love all of it.
So yeah, long story short, it was a very complicated beginning. And, I mean, obviously, without getting into the nitty gritty details, it is complicated. I was married and then got divorced. And I know people have a lot of emotions about that, but I do have to say, like, I found my person. And, sometimes you have to make the right choice, even though when you're going to lose to a certain extent and you're going to hurt someone to a certain extent. It was chaotic. But here we are. It's been 6 years almost now.
That's right.
Yep.
6.5.
6.5 to be exact.
6.5 together. And did you guys get
That's
married?
right.
Was it recently? Because I'm a total Instagram stalker and I feel like I've seen your wedding photos.
Yes. Yeah, it'll be our 3rd year in October.
I think that's right. Yeah, we got married about three years ago. But we like to put those photos back up frequently because it's our favorite day ever, obviously.
Awesome. Love that.
That's Sarah and mine too. Kathryn, I got a question for you. So was it just that you fell in love, or did something click in your head like, oh, I want to be with a woman from now on, or I've always wanted to be with a woman? Or was it that you were following your sexual identity, or was it just you were following your heart into this relationship?
It's a great question because it wasn't a coming out moment for me. I like to call it a falling in moment. And I've always been attracted to humans. I, historically speaking, had been in committed relationships with men, but had been with women throughout my life as well. And it's something that I think about a lot. Had I been raised differently, had I been raised kind of in the younger generation now, where you're not raised as a girl to like pink and talk about the husband that you're going to have someday, and vice versa. So many children who are being raised right now, their parents like, who do you like? Who is, they don't use gender pronouns, and they just allow their children to be who they are. And I do think if I had been raised that way, and by the way, my parents accepted Kate like that. It's not that I was raised with any homophobia. I was just raised in the classic boy meets girl, girl meets boy upbringing. And I do believe had I been raised differently, I probably would have been in a lot of relationships with men and women, because it's the person. It's I mean, you can go down to physical attraction, but it's so much beyond like the meat suit of the person that speaks to my soul and who I want to be with. And Kate just was everything. Yes, she was beautiful and gorgeous, but she was the right person for me. She hit all the notes for me.
She was the starting value of 10 for Kathryn at gymnastics 10. But what I think is
Love
interesting
it so much, babe,
has been that I came out for the first time in 2003 because you never stop coming out. I still have to decide whether to come out to my Uber driver, right? Who asks me, who might just be trying to make conversation and be like, oh, so is your husband at home or something? And I'm like, hello, no. But, so you never stop coming out. But when I first came out in 2003, like, it didn't go well. It was a different time. And so when I met Kathryn, And she's like, I live in South Carolina in Charleston. And we're going to have to tell my, at the time, 77-year-old dad that I'm leaving my husband to be with you. Like, I was like, this is not going to go well. And it went like, they were like, okay, great. This is great. Perfect. Like her mom and her dad. The first time I ever visited Kathryn in Charleston, she picked me up from the airport. We went directly to this restaurant, and about 3 minutes in, Kathryn was like, actually, my mom's on the way to meet us for a drink. And I'm like, oh my God, like your, older generation mom who's been in South Carolina for 12 years, like give me some space here, because it took me 4 years to come out to certain people. And I'm like, oh, but they were absolutely amazing. And within our relationship, I would say I'm the one that I'll drop her hand if we're walking down the street and I don't feel like the vibe is right. And she has to grab it and bring it back, because I have all of this early 2000s experiences that are embedded inside of me that I have a hard time. There's a lot of internalized homophobia that I have, having played college basketball, women's college basketball, where there were no out female coaches, even though half of them were gay, but they were all just married to Jesus and wouldn't talk about it. And you can't help but absorb that. Oh, this is the thing I'm shamed about. This is a thing that I don't tell anyone. And I live my life one way in public and one way in private. And it took me a very long time to get rid of all of that. And Kathryn saw the tail end of it. And a lot of the way she was in the world helped me eradicate, it'll never be 100% gone, but I would say all but the smallest, granular remains of that internalized homophobia.
Kate, what was it like with your family? Was there a point when you came out to your family?
Yeah, I came out to my family when I was in college, at the end of college. And it was just really complicated, not just because it was a different time, but because the year leading up to that, I'd been in a relationship with a woman in college and just completely lied about it to my family. So it was hard. It was hard to divorce their reaction and their disapproval from the lying. Were they disappointed in me because I'd been lying, or were they disappointed because I was gay? I think there was a little bit of mourning the life that they thought I would have, the husband and all of that. And some of it was just, wow, you've just been completely deceitful. And I don't know that we can trust the things you're saying now. So it didn't go. And I was on and I wrote a book about this, but I was on a basketball team that happened to have born again Christians on it, even though it was Boulder, Colorado, state school. But we just had a core 6 or 7 fellowship of Christian athletes, fundamentalist, and they were my good friends on the team. And they dropped me from the moment I told them this. And we have and I was so close to my team at that time. And I haven't talked to any of them in not 20 years, but 18 years. So it didn't go well all around. It didn't inspire confidence in me that I would go forth in every job I have. I would speak openly. It wasn't until I got to ESPN and there was an executive editor at the magazine who was gay. And I remember distinctly, we're in a meeting about a story and we walk out and she's with a bunch of colleagues and she just says, well, she made a joke about, women in sports and being gay. And I was like, ooh. And she was like, but I can say that because I'm gay. And this was mind blowing to me that in an office environment that she would just openly be out. And that was sort of the start of my realizing that I had to be a little more trusting and courageous after the experience I had in college.
My father, when I was a kid growing up, my dad was an alcoholic, and we had many, painful memories from being a kid. But when my father turned 66, it was 4 years before he passed away, he had a stroke. And it was like having a stroke. It was like being sick made him well. He blossomed into this really beautiful person who went from just being kind of a quiet, like, he had two emotions. It was either like total quiet and nothing, or rage. And there was very little in between except maybe sarcasm and cynicism. But he could be very funny, and he was very loving in his own way, but he could never express it. And when he had his stroke, I went and saw him one day, and I said, Dad, it seems like you've changed. You've turned into this like other person I never knew before. And he said, I never changed. It was just that before I could never express it. It was always there, but I just never could figure out a way to do it. And so I wonder, in your father's journey with ALS, and as ALS, for people who don't know, it's one of the worst diagnoses you can get. One day your finger doesn't work, and the next week your hand, your arm, and eventually you die from paralysis. And what was that journey like in, getting to know your father in that way, and the changes that he went through?
Yeah, well, thank you for that question, and also for advocating for ALS, for change, for cures, for all of it, because it's one of those diseases where if it's not in your life, you don't even want to know about it because it's so scary. And I feel like that's part of the issue with ALS, is like the way, even just, I remember my dad, when we would go to the clinic, like the ALS clinic that he would have to go every 6 months, we'd see people farther along in their diagnosis, in wheelchairs, unable to move. And like, he didn't even want to look at that because he didn't want to see his future. And so I think there's that huge barrier just in the general population being like, well, why would I consider that? And why would I even want to engage in that? Because it's so terrifying. And so I think just even speaking openly and having so many more people have understanding of what ALS is, because it's not an incurable disease, it's an underfunded one. That's my little stump speech there. But my dad, my dad and I were so close growing up. I mean, when as a 12-year-old girl, he walked into his pickup game and he was like, Kate's playing from now on, and then proceeded to pick me first every time we played pickup together. And eventually that became the right decision to make, because I was actually pretty good. But when I was 12, there were other guys that would have been better. But he was like, nope, why would I not want to play with my daughter? Why would I not want the experience of picking her and having her on my team? Like, I remember we were driving home. I'm like, Mike is better than me. And he's like, yeah, but do you think that I want an experience with Mike? No, I want an experience with you. So we were incredibly close. And my coming out was probably the second decision that like led us on a fork in the road. First was going so far away to college. I went from New York to Colorado. He was really upset because he wanted me to stay close to home so he could see my games and so he could be a part of my college experience. And I just wanderlust, starry-eyed. I was like, who wouldn't go to Boulder, Colorado? And they were in the top 10. And he was really hurt by that. So that was the first division. Me coming out, I'm not sure how much it was me coming out or me. I never came out to him. I only came out to my mom. And then I made my mom tell him. He was not a big fan of that. Lost a lot of trust there. But we never stopped talking. It was kind of an estrangement that I think is probably more common than the whole, well, I haven't talked to my parents in 15 years. That definitely happens. This was more, he called me every day on the way to work and home from work. It's just we didn't say a lot of things. We talked about the Mets. We talked about the Knicks. We talked about the structural things that were happening in our life, but we didn't really apologize for things or excavate things. And so when he was diagnosed with ALS, it was a wake-up call for me because I had known that I had things to say. I had things to apologize for. But I was always scared to be vulnerable with him because we'd had this like competitive childhood where we played one-on-one. That was part of it. And then another part of it was that I think we do this a lot in our relationships. We predict how we think the person is going to react. So I was like, well, if I'm vulnerable with him, he's just going to blow it off. I thought he'd be like, once his ALS diagnosis, I thought he'd say, so I'm dying. You think I'm dying and that's why you're doing this. And he would shut it down. But ALS is a relentless disease. and you're constantly faced with your own mortality. And I just made the decision to put myself in front of my dad time and time again, instead of thinking it was going to be one big, beautiful conversation. I was like, no, I have to chip away at this, like most things. And so I just went there, and I went there, and I would sit with him, and I would be with him, and we take drives, and we just kind of like melted the ice slowly, and just got to a point where we could say the things we needed to say. And I don't take that for granted, because, ALS is a horrible disease, but it also gave us time and opportunity. He wouldn't say these things, right? He would have been like, no, fuck ALS all the way through, no silver linings. But in my experience with it, it was incredibly awful. And then there was these beautiful things that came from it. And one of them being just a complete and 100% reconciling with me and my dad. That is the most beautiful thing to me now, to have that legacy of our relationship, rather than the regret and the, disappointment in how I behaved and my fear-based reaction to things. So
do you outline that transition or that journey with your dad in your book?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, the book is structured. There's 8 life lessons that were taught to me on the court, but that extend beyond the court. One of them is don't ever let anyone win. I'm a firm believer that you just shouldn't let people win at things. I think it's like lying. That doesn't mean you crush small children at everything, but I don't think it's healthy to let them win. And I think it's building like a false sense of confidence, but I digress. So it's structured like 8 life lessons on the basketball court. And then the chapters around that, I try to tell a story arc of my dad and I growing up together, and then our disillusionment with each other, and the growing apart that I think happens no matter how great a relationship is, a nuclear family relationship. Life is going to happen, and you are going to dent that relationship. And then trying to tell how we slowly came back to each other at the end, and those last weeks and days with him, as after he decided that he was ready to die, like the things we talked about. Well, I talked, he couldn't talk anymore. And until the very end, on the day that he died. And I try to, it sounds sad, but I hope that it's beautiful and celebratory and gratitude filled.
Yeah. It does sound beautiful. And it sounds like something that I know a lot of people can resonate with and will resonate with when they read your book. Just the statement of just saying it's like this estrangement that we're speaking every day, but we're not actually speaking the real stuff, like the real stuff that's bothering us. We're just kind of like the stuff that's not going to rock the boat. I know I definitely resonate with that. And it's funny, I had a conversation with my mom a couple weeks ago, actually. And I said, you know what? I'm done trying to sugarcoat things to not hurt anyone, like to not hurt your feelings. And I'm just going to be honest. Like, I'm not going to hold back. And so I think generationally too, I find a lot of people in our generation have done that. Like, you don't want to hurt your parents, and your parents were like, they're also expected to be put on a pedestal because they are the parents. And I'm trying to break that now that we have a son. I'm trying to break that cycle. And it's not that our parents are bad people or were bad people. That was their own, like training too and conditioning. So now we're seeing a positive parenting coach, and I'm trying to do like positive parenting. Yeah. And sometimes I'm like, Tosh, just put on your damn pajamas.
Degree of difficulty 100, by the way.
It's one. So hard. And I'm like, how am I going to take Tosh home? He won't even put on his pajamas. My parents are going to be like, what kind of parent are you? But thank you so much, Kate, for sharing that about your dad and speaking about and being a nurse and hearing you just speak about the real realities of like going to the clinic and knowing what's ahead of you. And Michael and I started a nonprofit 7 years ago, and it was inspired by a couple named Hope and Steve December. And Steve was diagnosed with ALS, and he was 2 years into his diagnosis when we met him. And he just passed away a year ago, but they had their website was Hope for Steve. and their Twitter handle, and they're always tweeting at Michael saying like, we're going to be at this show in Florida. We'd like to meet you. And being a nurse at the time, I was so curious about the story. And so we saw their wedding video, and Steve was able-bodied at the time, able to walk down the aisle. And when we met him, he was now in a wheelchair. And that was before the Ice Bucket Challenge. So people really had no idea what ALS was. But yeah, we're here, and we want to be advocates for you too, and for your dad, and for all those who are.
And from that experience of Steve coming to that concert that we invited him to, we our nonprofit, Do It for the Love, we bring people with advanced stages of life-threatening illnesses to concerts, and they're able to have that break with their family. They're able to go see artists that they've always wanted to see, and but I wanted to ask you, Kathryn, about music. There's some teachers who teach with music and some teachers who don't. And music is a way to really access different emotions. It's a way to drop into your strength at times and you feel like you can't go any further. What role does music play in what you do?
Music is so important in my life, but when I did my training, my mentor, Mati Ezrati, was very stern about not playing music in the class. And her reasoning for that was that it pulls people away from the ability to, what we talked about earlier in the podcast, to clear the mind and be present. And I have mixed feelings about it. As a student, I love taking classes without music. I love taking classes with music. But it's so subjective because there's so many different styles of music. It's so evocative because you can be in a classroom where someone plays a song that can either light you up and change the rest of your day, or they could play a song that brings up memories that you didn't think you were going to have to handle in that moment. And so it's so, with a playlist, it's very complicated because it's going to affect every student so differently. Unless it's like an ambient kind of background music. That being said, I have taught with live musicians before, and that effing rocks. I love that because then it's about the kula, it's about the community, it's about getting everybody fired up. And as a teacher, I play off of the musician, and the musician plays off of me, and then the students kind of guide us, and it becomes this very special live interactive experience, which I miss. I think that's magical. But as a teacher, for me, I short of sounding like an egomaniac, I have a lot to say as a teacher. And when I'm teaching, I don't want my students, singing along to the song on my playlist. I want them listening to me, and I want them with me. So it's also a challenge for me as a teacher to be engaging and to say the right things and to keep people with me, instead of relying on a soundtrack to keep my students present.
Yeah. When I started in yoga, I was practicing Ashtanga, and there's no music there. And yet I would find that I was writing music in class. Like I would get all these things would come to my head, like all these ideas would come, and I'd be like, God, I wish I had a pen here, and I'd be trying to like remember, and I would forget things and be like, God damn, that was the coolest song I ever wrote, and it's gone. It's but I want to hear more about that, just like about how yoga has transformed you, from being that person who was so, just uncertain or shy or quiet or whatever, and then becoming the powerhouse that you are as a teacher today.
Well, thank you. I like anything, it's time. It takes time. It takes practice in the same way, especially Ashtanga, right? Ashtanga is a set sequence of poses. For people who don't know what Ashtanga is, you go in, it tends to be very strict, and you don't get the next posture until the teacher thinks that you have, for lack of better terminology, earned it. And just like that, I think that's where confidence and empowerment comes from. It takes time. And ironically, it takes a lot of messing up. It takes a lot of saying the wrong thing, doing the wrong thing, getting a big old vat of humble soup and just slurping it down, and recognizing, like, that's where I've learned how to be the most powerful, is understanding what doesn't fuel my power. So, and I think so many people are afraid of failing, and they're afraid of looking flawed, or especially in the seat of a teacher. Teachers don't want to show up in front of their students and look mortal sometimes. And that's a big problem in the yoga community, is that the seat of the teacher is this elevated guru-like figure, which is, it's BS. For me, it's very important as a teacher to see eye to eye with my students, because if we don't have that, I'm not going to be able to give them the experience that they want. And that's empathy, and that's connection. And I see you and you see me. I mean, the whole point of Namaste is being able to see the soul, the spirit, the light inside of each other. So, it's power doesn't mean sitting on a throne wearing a crown. Power is being connected with community and being right next to each other.
Yeah. Hey, Kate, there's a question that I ask everybody who's on this show. And I'm going to ask you first. You're kind of in the lucky spot, Kathryn, because you're going to get Kate's time to think about this, because you're going to have to answer.
I fell asleep thinking about this question. Okay, so my wheels have been going.
Maybe you should flip. Maybe you should flip a coin or roll some dice here. Yeah,
it was in the email.
It's the same thing on both sides.
It says Kate on both sides, by the way.
I thought it was only one-sided. Sorry.
So the question I ask everybody is, what does it mean to you to be human, and how do you stay human? And to be fair, I'll throw it out to whoever was ready to answer first. Go for it. What does it mean to be human, and how do you hold on to it?
Yeah. For me, it's writing. And I guess I think that for everyone, it's something different. Whatever writing does for me, that thing can be created in other people through other creative outlets or, movement based. But for me, I don't know what I'm thinking, what my place is, what the world is doing. How do I make sense of it until I try to write it? And so that is the number one way that I connect with people, that I connect with who I am and what my experience has been, because there are those little insights that can come up whenever, for me, when I'm writing, that if I didn't sit down to write, it would change, if this is possible, but it enriches my memories, writing. It enriches my connection to people, and the most obvious example for me right now is my dad, having just sat down to write a book about him and what happened with his ALS and my childhood with him. I looked at that differently because I've sat down and excavated it through writing. And if it's possible, I love him more because I sat down and did the thing that makes me human. Therefore, I saw his humanity more clearly by trying to articulate what I thought he was thinking and why he made decisions he made and said the things he said. And so writing for me creates empathy for myself, for other people, for what is going on in the world. So, and when I don't write, when I go too long without writing, it's, I get a little cloudy with how I think and who I am, because that is my number one way to make sense.
Mm-hmm. I totally get that. And that's the same process that I go through with my songs. And after I write a song, I feel like, wow, I can understand. I get my head around what it was that I've been feeling, Mm-hmm. Kathryn, how about you? What does it mean to you to be human, and how do you stay that way?
For me to be human, and I will explain all of this, for me to be human is recognizing the magic inside of me, what I'm woven of, and then staying human is making other people remember that they are that too. And that has become so clear to me in the past year, because I grew up loving magic, but I also have been reprimanded throughout my life for it being childish, and for, magic being something that belongs in fairy tale books and something that eventually you put away on the shelf and you become an adult and you move on with your life. And it's similar to Kate I'm a writer also. I just finished my first novel that I'm about to put on submission that is indeed about magic. My book club circles around magic. House of Phoenix is about a mythological bird. Everything is about magic, but it's remembering that even as we mature, as we come into our seat of power, that there is this mysticism, there is something that's bigger than us. There's something that cannot be put into words that needs to be vibrating inside of us every single day. It's that je ne sais quoi, the thing that is not meant to be understood, but the thing that is meant to be felt. And when I cannot quite put my finger on it, but I feel that fire getting stoked inside of me, that's when I know, like, I'm onto something. That's when I know, like, this is what I need to keep creating. This is what I need to keep offering. And just that beautiful curiosity of being a child when you do believe in magic. And I mean, this is a whole long story that we don't need to get into, but when Kate and I first started dating, we were at a restaurant and I told her how there's so much inside of us untapped. And I believe that if I stared at that candle long enough, like with my mind, I could make that light up, and that it's in me. I just haven't been taught how to access these parts of myself. And she was kind of like, for real? But
I was like, metaphorically, I agree.
And I'm like, no, for real, like legitimately, physically, I can light this candle on fire. And so it's important for me and my students and my
I feel like that's what I would say to you.
Degree of difficulty, 1,000.
I feel like Michael is a lot like Kathryn and I'm a lot like Kate. Like, I'd be like, yeah, totally, babe, totally. Metaphorically though, right? Like, not
Hey, you guys, this has been awesome.
Thank you.
Oh yeah, let's talk about Soulshine at Sea. Yeah.
Oh,
go for it, Sarah. Jump in on it.
I was gonna say, I'm so excited
I'm
about
so
our
excited.
2-on-2
power couple.
Yeah.
Have you guys ever done a boat thing like this before? Have you guys ever been on a boat?
Kathryn
I
has.
have. I taught on a cruise once, and we got to the Bahamas, and it was too windy, and we didn't get to get off of the boat. So I started eating soft serve for breakfast, lunch, and dinner after that.
It happened on my first cruise experience too. It was too windy, we couldn't. That was my first one.
Well, on my cruise experience, I just went straight to the soft serve machine. Period.
That's what we tell people when fans are like, "Hey guys, we're so excited." I'm like, "You'll find Michael at the soft serve. Just hang out there long enough, and you'll see Michael." God. We are so stoked about it. It's been our dream to host something like this, like literally, and we're here in Bali right now where we have our resort called Soulshine, which I'm not sure. Kathryn, have you ever been to Soulshine here? Have you taught yoga?
No, it is on my to-do list.
That is our 2023 list. We got to get you guys out here, teaching out here too. And we could do like a writing workshop or something. But anyway, so we're so stoked because me and Michael go like full in. I was gonna say full throttle. Is that appropriate? Full throttle.
I guess.
I
don't know if it's nautical. I don't know if it's a nautical term, but yeah.
It's more of a race.
It's more of a
term.
Scooter term. Yeah.
But like we have theme nights, and the theme nights are gonna be pirate night.
Yeah, we have a pirate night. We've got a what the fuck are you wearing night, which is basically like recycled whatever, anything you want.
Find anything on the cruise ship to dress in.
Yeah.
And then a groovy peace, love,
and rock and roll
night.
Yeah.
So we're so stoked to have you guys. Are going to be such a great contributor to the boat and the energy.
And our lifestyle, Sarah and I, we try to be 100% healthy 90% of the time. And this is definitely like the 10% on the boat. But it's like Sarah always says we have green juice in the morning and green juice with tequila in it at night. Metaphorically speaking, of course.
Of course.
But it is our time to celebrate and have fun and be around other people who just love music and are into wellness. And there's all kinds of yoga, fitness, HIIT, there's storytelling workshops, there's hand drumming classes, there's all kinds of things on board that we believe in, that wellness is more than just, I ate an organic salad and I went to a yoga class on Saturday. You know, it's like, how do we feel? Am I happy?
Mm-hmm.
Am I finding a creative outlet? Can I be with this person who I love so much in quarantine and we can still get along? Like all these things are about wellness, you know, and we are really all about like trying to make that definition be a lot broader than what it's traditionally
Yeah, absolutely.
been.
And the community that comes off of these 4 days are just so beautiful. And so that's something that we're probably the most excited about.
So if you're listening, go to soulshineatsea.com and find out. And how can folks find you guys? Are you guys on Instagram and all the
We're on the Instagram. All my handles are my name. It's Kathryn Budig. And I invite everyone to Haus of Phoenix, HAUS, Haus of Phoenix. And they can come practice with me there, where I am going to create a Soul Shine at Sea class where you can expect a lot of weird pirate and boat poses. So get ready for that. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm at Kate Fagan 3 on the social. The 3 is in honor of former New York Knick John Starks. In case you're wondering if there's a Kate Fagan 1 or 2, there might be, but that's why I'm Kate Fagan 3. And my book is All the Colors Came Out.
He was also a Golden State Warrior, by the way. So
he was good. We got some Starks knowledge. We can chop it up on the boat.
Yeah. Hey, you guys, thanks for being on the show. We want to say thank you to Get Your Guitars. And I want to say thanks to Sarah for being her first time on the show. Bravo,
you know, I may come back again. We may
the new co-host.
I may be your co-host, babe.
Yes.
I may be your co-host. Thanks, you guys, so much. It was so fun hanging out with you guys.
I can't wait to see y'all.
Awesome.
And we'll see you on next week's episode of the Stay Human Podcast. Peace.